Palestinian fighters take part in a parade against Aqaba summit. Masked Palestinian fighters of the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine take part in a parade in Rafah town in the southern Gaza Strip on Sunday, February 26, 2023, in support of the West Bank and Palestinians in Israeli jails and against the Palestinian-Israeli Aqaba summit. From Press TV, Velayati, U.S. organized Jordan summit indicative of Israel's crisis and predicaments. A senior advisor to the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid al-Khamenei, says the so-called Israeli-Palestinian Security Summit, organized by the White House in the Jordanian resort city of Aqaba, shows the Israeli regime is facing a myriad of crises and predicaments. Ali Akbar Velayati made the remarks in a Sunday phone call with Ismail Haniyeh, who heads the political office of the Gaza-based Palestinian resistance movement Hamas. He said Israel resorts to such meetings to get out of the predicaments it's facing, adding that the Palestinian people are very close to clinching a final victory against the Tel Aviv regime. The senior Iranian official emphasized that such meetings would have no impact on the Palestinian nation and their resistance, but would add to the number of Muslim countries, groups, and movements that support Palestine. The Hamas chairman, for his part, said the Palestinian resistance is in a new stage of confrontation with the Zionist occupiers. Commenting on the Palestinian Authority's participation in the Jordan security meeting, Haniyeh emphasized that the general Palestinian stance is against such a meeting. He said the Palestinian Authority does not represent the Palestinian people, adding that the enemy is faced with a strategic crisis and such meetings would fail to save it. Iran supports Islamic Jihad Palestinian resistance, Velayati. In a support phone call with Ziad al-Nakhali, the Secretary General of Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement, Velayati hailed the unity of the Palestinian people in the face of the Zionist occupiers. The Islamic Republic supports the Islamic Jihad movement and the resistance of the Palestinian people, he added. Nakhali, for his part, reiterated the Palestinian nation's determination to continue fighting and confronting the Israel's regime's forces. He added that the courage of the Palestinian fighters and the nation's support for them prove the invincibility of the Palestinian nation. He emphasized that the Palestinians will continue to resist until the liberation of the Al-Quds and the entire Palestinian territory. Nakhali also expressed the resistance front's opposition to the Jordan meeting. Israeli Palestinians pledged to curb violence at Jordan meeting by Suleiman al-Khalidi. Israel and Palestinian officials pledged to de-escalate surging violence after meeting on Sunday, issuing a joint statement in which Israel said it would halt discussions about new settlement units in the occupied West Bank for 4 months. Attended by senior U.S., Jordanian, and Egyptian officials in addition to the Israeli and Palestinian delegations, the meeting in Aqaba, Jordan, was the first of its kind in years. The Israeli and Palestinian sides, in their statement that they would work closely to prevent further violence and reaffirm the necessity of committing to de-escalation on the ground, affirmed their commitment to previous agreements. Jordan, along with its allies Egypt and the U.S., said the understandings were major progress towards reestablishing and deepening relations between the two sides. But underlining the challenges, Palestinian militant group Hamas, which governs the Gaza Strip, called the meeting worthless and condemned the West Bank Palestinian Authority for taking part. The meeting was held as anxiety mounts of an escalation in violence in the run-up to the holy Muslim month of Ramadan that begins in late March. Israel and the Palestinian Authority confirmed their joint readiness and commitment to immediately work to end unilateral measures for a period of 3 to 6 months, the statement said. This includes an Israeli commitment to stop discussion of any new settlement units for 4 months and to stop authorization of any outposts for 6 months. That could cause trouble in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government, one of the most right-wing in Israeli history. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, just a moment. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who also has responsibilities over Jewish settlements in the West Bank, quickly said he would not abide by any such agreement. I have no idea what they spoke about or not in Jordan, Smotrich wrote on Twitter. But one thing I do know, there will not be any freeze on the building and development and settlements, not even for one day. It's under my authority. The Palestinians aim to establish an independent state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip with East Jerusalem as its capital, territories Israel captured in the 1967 war. But peace talks have been stalled since 2014, and Palestinians say Jewish settlement expansion has undermined the chances of a viable state being established. Israel, on February 12th, granted retroactive authorization to 9 Jewish settler outposts in the West Bank and announced mass construction of new homes within established settlements. A senior official said there'd be no change to the previous decision regarding authorization of these outposts and 9,500 housing units. Netanyahu seemed to downplay any commitment, saying Israel would continue settlement building along previous plans and saying there will not be any freeze. The UN Security Council issued a formal statement on February 20th denouncing Israel's plan to expand settlements on occupied Palestinian territory, the first action in the U.S. has allowed the body to take against its ally, Israel, in 6 years. U.S. President Joe Biden thanked Jordan's King Abdullah for convening the historic gathering. U.S. Nation Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said in a statement, "We recognize that this meeting was a starting point and that there's much work to do over the coming weeks and months to build a stable and prosperous future for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Implementation will be critical," he said. The participants will meet again in March in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. They agreed to maintain positive momentum and expand this agreement towards wider political processes, or a wider political process leading to a just and lasting peace, their statement said. Hamas official Sami Abu Zuri said the meeting would not change anything. It will not succeed to prevent our people from defending themselves and confronting the crimes conducted by the government of the occupation, he told Reuters. In the latest violence, a Palestinian gunman killed 2 Jewish settlers in their car in the West Bank on Sunday. Israeli officials said there was no immediate claim of responsibility. Hamas said it was a natural response to a crime conducted by the occupation, the last of which was a massacre in Nablus, where 11 Palestinians were killed, 6 gunmen and 5 civilians, in an Israeli raid on February 23rd. In previous years, clashes have erupted between Israeli police and Palestinians around Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque at the height of the Ramadan fasting month that coincided with Judean Passover and Christian Easter. A Jordanian official warned of a very difficult dynamic on the ground with escalation happening ahead of Ramadan and Passover. Jerusalem is holy to all 3 faiths. Jordan's Hashemite royal family is the custodian of Muslim and Christian holy sites in East Jerusalem. Several Palestinian factions from armed groups within mainstream Fatah to Islamist Hamas and Islamic Jihad urged the PA to withdraw from the meeting, calling it a U.S.-led plot against Palestinian aspirations. Here's Press TV on the matter.
Hello and welcome to Press TV Spotlight. I'm Marzia Hashimi. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, from Camp David to Oslo and so many others in between, and now Aqaba are sites of talks between certain Palestinian factions and Israelis, which have taken place over the years. This time, the talks were said to be about security, as Israel has increased its aggression and brutality against Palestinians. 11 Palestinians were killed on February the 22nd alone, and already this year is on track for a record regarding the number of Palestinians who have been murdered by Israel. So how do security talks being held in Jordan in the presence of the Israelis, Americans, Egyptians, and Palestinian Authority address the suffering of the Palestinians? The majority of Palestinians have said no to talks, and that resistance is the only way forward. Stay with us as we take a look at all of this on this Spotlight. I'd like to welcome my guests now to the program. Mike Pillet, author and human rights activist out of Washington, D.C. And Laith Maruf, activist and political commentator out of Beirut. Thank you both for being with me. I'd like to start it off in D.C. Miko, why do you think that the U.S. wanted Jordan to host this meeting at this time?
Well, thanks for having me. Well, they've got to maintain this appearance that they're trying to do something. They want to maintain this appearance that the United States is some kind of an honest broker. They want to maintain the appearance that it's just a matter of getting together and negotiating. And of course, none of that is true. As you know, nice as it may be for all of them to meet in Jordan, in Aqaba or wherever, that's not the issue. The issue is not that there's some misunderstanding. The issue is not that there needs to be some kind of a brokering, some kind of an arrangement with security issues. We're talking about a massive assault by a new Israeli government that is made of zealots, that is going to take on the Palestinian prisoners, decided to take on Jerusalem, is cracking down on Palestinians all around Jerusalem. And in the West Bank. And like I said, they've taken on the prisoner issue, which of course touches the hearts of all Palestinians. We know Ramadan is around the corner, and Israel is not going to let down on any of its pressure against the Palestinians. Mm-hmm. So this is one of these theatrical events where they all get together and pretend to get along. It's not going to lead to anything.
Well, Lies, your perspective, why do you think the PA accepted the invitation? I mean, does it representatives really think that it's going to make a difference? The Israelis are going to stop its brutality?
Oh, the PA doesn't.
No, this actual conference is being focused on the security of the Zionist colony. Right now, both the Palestinian Authority and the Jordanians are trying to figure out how to shore their own security up as the Palestinian population continues rising up in a military resistance in the West Bank. We know this is really the focus of what happened, and especially if you look right now at the statements that came out saying that the Zionists are going to guarantee 3 months of no expansion of settlements in return, basically, for the Palestinian Authority increasing its collaboration with the occupier, increasing its intelligence collection, and handing over the resistance youth and leaders in the West Bank. So this is what we see as we are speaking right now in most of the West Bank. Populations are out demonstrating against the Palestinian Authority collaboration with the enemy occupier, and it's gonna focus more. The choice is now becoming clearer. It's impossible to correct the tail of a dog, as we would say. The Palestinian Authority, from its foundation, is a collaborative regime, mm-hmm. and many Palestinians have bet that they can maybe correct it and bring it to the side of the resistance, but it's impossible under the current leadership.
Well, what about that, Miko? Do you think that basically one of the reasons having this meeting at this point in time is to make sure that the PA actually increases their cooperation, that there was perhaps a little fear at one point in time that the PA had said that they were ending their cooperation, security cooperation, briefly. But is that part of it, that, as a matter of fact, because with the increase in Israeli aggression, they also want an increase in this cooperation with the PA to actually stop the resistance?
Yes, it's well known that when the Secretary of State Blinken was in Palestine a month ago, one of the ideas that was placed in front of the Palestinian Authority is the creation of a new force within the Palestinian Authority that would engage and fight the Palestinian resistance forces in Nablus and Jenin, because Israel doesn't want to deal with it, and Israel is not successful in dealing with it. And so they want to pit Palestinians against Palestinians and pay the Palestinian Authority to do this. So I'm sure that's really what's being talked about here. This has nothing to do with benefiting the Palestinians. I agree with my colleague, the other speaker. I think that this is just one big collaboration with Israel. We have to remember that America is the biggest collaborator, with billions of dollars and weapons being sent to Israel and laws being passed in the Senate and the House of Representatives every day, even as we speak right now, that support Israel and make resistance to Israel less and less, more and more difficult. And so it's got nothing to do with benefiting the Palestinians. And indeed, I'm sure they're pressuring the Palestinian Authority to accept this deal where they get paid in order for to get Palestinians trained by the Americans, in order to go fight in Jenin and Nablus against their brothers and sisters who are resisting heroically.
What about that, Laith? I mean, with the situation, as you said, the sides are more and more clear each day. Do you see the majority of Palestinians, as a matter of fact, rising up against the PA itself in order basically for them to unite with the resistance and be successful?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at what is happening in Jenin, in Nablus, in Hebron, in Jericho, it's clear that even there's parts of the Palestinian security forces that are controlled by President Abbas that have broken off and decided to work with the resistance on the ground. So we see right now a fracturing of the security forces under control of Abbas, and they're backed by a wave of popular support. Just a few days ago, the massacre in Nablus, the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people came out across the West Bank. We know that the population is moving probably even faster than what the resistance would like, but the situation is very volatile. We also know yesterday the Jordanian government claimed to have shot down a drone coming from Syria carrying weapons to be smuggled into those West Bank. You know, maybe this is true or not, but we know for sure that the resistance axis is smuggling as much weapons as it can as fast as possible to the resistance in the West Bank, and everybody is holding their breath. There's those who bet there will be a civil war inside Israel first. There's others that bet that there will be a armed confrontation in the West Bank before anything. Either of those situations are going to trigger us a regional war, and the players that are in Aqaba are the axis on the side of the United States and Israel. We know already who's the axis of resistance.
What about that, Miko? Laith just mentioned about the possibility of a civil war in Israel, because I want to look at this situation, the whole, and possibilities. Do you see that as a possibility, a real possibility?
I don't think it is. I think the Israelis are, I mean, they're very comfortable, and they're worried about erosion of some of the rights of the Israelis who live as a privileged society within the apartheid regime. And even though they've been, you know, very, very clear in their demands, and they're pushing boundaries, and they're blocking highways, Netanyahu, the Israeli government led by Netanyahu, doesn't care about them because they didn't vote for him anyway, and he has a very comfortable majority. So as with other protests that we've seen in the past by Israelis against policies that affect them, eventually it's going to die down. And of course, we know very well that had these Israelis been really concerned with change, they could have been demanding, you know, rights for the Palestinians. They could have been demanding ending the blockade on Gaza. They could have been demanding the release of Palestinian prisoners. So I don't think this is going to go, and I don't think it's going to go that far. Israelis are far too comfortable.
What is it, staying with you, Mika, what is it then about the Israeli society? You just mentioned something that had they really wanted to change the different things that they could have demanded. Is it that they do not see the oppression and the violence that's taking place against the Palestinians, or is it justified in their mind, or is it that they just don't care?
In most people, it's fully justified. It's fully justified. And so, I mean, everybody knows what's going on. It's in the news. Everybody has a brother or a relative or somebody who's either in the secret police or in the military. You know, I mean, Israelis know exactly what's going on, and they just, they agree with it. They don't think there's a problem. I mean, it doesn't matter which government, which party is in power. we know that the policies against Palestinians remain the same. This time, the only difference is that this time, the people that are in coalition with Netanyahu and are really taken over and hold key positions are zealots, are right-wing, mad people who are zealots, who are quite happy to see the whole ground burn, and that's precisely where they're leading this right now.
Well, Lyeth, with this increased oppression by the Israeli regime, do you think that we're going to see more unity and more of a call by the resistance, and it becoming more adhesive?
Well, definitely, it is bringing together all the resistance factions on the ground in all of historic Palestine. And it is also increasing the decay and the deterioration of Fatah as an organization and its factionism and fracturing, as we see parts of the youth wing of Fatah came out, for instance, today in a statement condemning the PA and President Abbas's visit and joining this Aqaba summit. So what is needed, of course, for a full unification of the Palestinian resistance is the liberation of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, from current control by Fatah and Mahmoud Abbas. Otherwise, there is no legal entity other than the PLO internationally that is recognized as the representative of the Palestinian people. And as long as the Palestinian majority, which are all on the side of the resistance, are not allowed the representation in the PLO as it is currently being held hostage by Mahmoud Abbas, we're at a stalemate there. So this is a question that the Palestinians have to answer, and it's a very critical question.
Well, how does that happen? Staying with you, Lyeth, basically, on the one hand, we know, as you said, the PA is recognized internationally, but the majority of people do not support the PA. So at this point in time, what needs to happen to change that scenario?
We have to return to the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, that holds all the political parties, and we have to make sure every Palestinian political party is part of the PLO, and this PLO is different than the Palestinian Authority, which is held hostage by the both Abbas faction and the Oslo in general agreement. The PLO needs to be revived, and it needs to bring in all the Palestinians, no matter where they are in 1948, in the diaspora, in what it recognizes. And those structures, by reactivating them and creating a democratic process through them, will strip away the last power centers that Abbas has.
Okay. Well, because of the Israelis' continued barbarism, there's a whole new generation of young Palestinians who seem to be adamant in freeing themselves and their people from this apartheid regime. In actuality, do you see the Israeli regime as shooting itself in the foot by this extremism, by this increased violence? Or your assessment of that?
Well, it's hard to say at this point, but I think where this is leading is definitely we're about to see. I think we're about to find out, because we have, like I said, they've taken on the prisoner population, and so the prisoner population have already announced a strike that will begin with Ramadan, a general strike, a general hunger strike. They're challenging the authority in Jerusalem. They are cracking down on Palestinians living in the Palestinian neighborhoods in Jerusalem and around Jerusalem. And during Passover, which is the Jewish holiday, this year will be right in the middle of Ramadan. And typically during Jewish holidays, there's a lockdown, and so all the Palestinian ghettos within the West Bank are closed. People cannot travel. Well, during Ramadan, people like to come to Jerusalem to pray. So we've got this barrel of gunpowder, and we've got madmen with a match, and we're going to see exactly what happens, and if anybody takes control over this, or I think it's very likely that we're about to see uh, Palestinians come out with an overall intifada from the river to the sea, including all parts of Palestine, a kind of intifada, a kind of uprising, the likes of which we've never seen.
Well, Lyeth, regarding the recent Israeli massacre in Nablus, United Nations called for an end to the escalation of violence, but with no condemnation of Israel nor any discussion of sanctions against the occupier regime, which is murdering people, or even holding Israel accountable. Do you think that that is enough proof that for the majority of Palestinians that they cannot have any expectations of the so-called international community?
Well, there's 80 years of proof. Any Palestinian who thinks that there is a possibility of getting their rights through groveling at the feet of the West is clearly delusional, and everybody knows it. You don't have to be a a rocket scientist to see the reality and written on the wall. The Zionist colony right now is not only doing things crazy because they want to be crazy. It's because they have reached the end of their line. There's nothing they can do further to reach their strategic goal of permanence as a colony. It's impossible. It's that the population, the Palestinian population, is not leaving Palestine, and already they are the majority within the territory between the river and the sea, and therefore the end is written in front of us. So the Zionists right now are having freak outs because the only option they have is total genocide of the Palestinians in the style of the 1800s and 1700 genocides, total genocide. That's the only way they can guarantee the continuity of this colony. So we will be witnessing much suffering and much outrage that we haven't seen before, because that's the only path forward. The Zionists are refusing equality with the Palestinians. They're refusing to leave peacefully. They want to take down the whole region with them as this colony ends.
And Miko, your take on that. I mean, do you see that there's any way that Israel would back down, would change its line? Or is it basically they have no choice? As Lyeth said, they've reached a point of no return, and in order to try to remain, they just will increase the brutality and continue with their oppressive line until perhaps there might be an implosion. Your overall assessment of that?
Well, no, Israel is plenty strong, and Israel has got plenty of support around the world. It's gaining more and more support and normalizing relations in the Arab world. It's normalizing.
What is this
relations
nothing
in
you
Africa,
talk about?
It's normalizing relations in different parts of Asia. Even within the Muslim countries and Arab countries that are still maintaining a moral stance and rejecting normalizing with Israel, we can see cracks. And so I think it's very important to strengthen those countries and strengthen those governments that are trying to maintain this moral stance. And so I don't think Israel is in any serious danger in terms of its existence at all. The only thing that might change that is if the international community began to support the Palestinian struggle. And so let's say that an overall general intifada breaks out throughout all of Palestine. Israel has the means to crack down and suppress it. That's not the point. The question is, will the international community begin to impose sanctions? Will the international community do the right thing morally and send their ambassadors out of, the Israeli ambassadors out of their capitals, call back ambassadors to Tel Aviv? In other words, there needs to be an international component for this to really be a major, major collapse of the Zionist state. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to see a real change.
Lyeth, 30 seconds. Final comments.
Look, definitely there is no such thing as an international community, and the West will never give up on the Zionist colony because it's the most important piece within the imperial order for the maintaining of hegemony over Africa and Asia. When without Israel, there will be no United States empire anymore. So this is not where we're going. Where we're going is direct confrontation on the ground. The Palestinians, as we've seen over the last 2 wars, are ready to take on the Zionists, and of course the resistance in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, and even in Iran. If things get heated enough that the Palestinians call for backup, they will come for the backup, as Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, informed us many times in the last year and a half. So we're ready for something without white man, giving us an okay for it.
And from I-24, Israel denies agreeing to freeze West Bank construction. A top Israel official has denied reports that the Israeli delegation has agreed to freeze the construction of new West Bank settlements for 4 months at one-day Israeli-Palestinian summit, or Palestinian summit held in Jordan. National Security Advisor Zachi Hanegbi, the most senior Israeli official to participate in the summit in Aqaba, added that Israel will authorize 9 outposts and approve the construction of 9,500 housing units in the West Bank in the coming months. The Palestinian Authority, meanwhile, agreed to consider resuming the security coordination with Israel. After thorough and frank discussions that included officials from Egypt as well as the U.S., the Palestinian and Israeli sides have reaffirmed that there's a need to commit to de-escalation on the ground and to prevent further violence, a joint statement after the meeting said. The two sides agreed to meet in Egypt in March. The first Israeli-Palestinian summit in years, the political security meeting was convened to try to restore calm after an uptick in deadly violence. However, a Palestinian terrorist murdered 2 young Jewish Israelis in the West Bank just as the summit was held. Yep, and so we'll be back with more news.